Hi there. So we have Steve Gaines here from the South Yorkshire County Athletics Association, who we're looking at planning a pilot at the end of October, the 24th of October in Rotherham. So I will hand over to Steve now and let him talk you through all the processes that led up to what could have been across country but wasn't quite across country. So over to you, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. Hi, everybody. By way of outline, my role as Club Secretary of Rotherham Harriers, I'm acutely aware of the need to try and get some competition for the athletes who are all relatively fit. Certainly the endurance athletes are relatively fit, having spent most of lockdown improving their fitness. So I was extremely keen to try and get something moving in South Yorkshire. And I was also keen to follow the principles that we talked about in the cross-country focus group around about establishing pilot events. So the intention was that we were going to organise an event which had up to 25 different clubs involved, because that's the number of clubs that exist in South Yorkshire. And the principle behind the event was that we were going to create a holding area for each of those 25 clubs inside the athletics stadium, and they'd be of a suitable size to accommodate a number of people, more than would be involved in each race. And that would mean people reporting to the athletics stadium being routed to their club holding area, where their team manager would be their only point of interaction with anyone else. We would take, for the 8 races that we were planning to hold, we would take each race start from the club pens to an athlete holding area, where they would then be taken out to a sealed start area. The start line would provide pens which were 2 meters wide, so a 50-meter wide start line. That start would happen, and the format of the event was to be a cross-country relay event, because feedback from the athletes is that's what they really were hopeful of taking part in. 3 legs in each of the races up to under 17, then 4 for senior women, and then 6 for senior men. And so the start and finish area was sealed, and no spectators were allowed into that area, no spectators, no coaches. So we'd got separation inside the stadium for the holding pens. We'd got separation for the people waiting to go out to the sealed start area. Each person ran a 1-lap course of about 2,300 meters. And as they came into the finish line, which was just behind the start area, we then released the second leg runner as the runner came in and finished. And the intention was we would just run a continuous timing and finish one race. We'd request everybody to leave immediately after their race and bring the next race out. And so each race was sealed. We submitted the documentation to the safety advisory group, and along with the documentation, risk assessment, event management plan, support letter from England saying that this was an approved pilot event, and we had a license issued for the pilot event. So everything went to the SAG, and all was looking okay, but unfortunately the 4 metropolitan borough councils involved in South Yorkshire all got together and produced a set of principles about 48 hours before the SAG meeting date, and after all my paperwork had been cleared and accepted and submitted. And the first principle was that the safety advisory group should only consent to the meeting taking place if they were comfortable that the infection rate was low enough. So unfortunately, everything was okay in terms of the submission. The format was deemed to be fine. The control methods were all deemed to be COVID secure. the risk assessment was signed off. There were 1 or 2 items of detail which were raised at the SAG meeting. The level of PPE that our first aid suppliers and response team were going to be using was one which I couldn't answer, but I did get an answer. And we were also asked some detailed questions, asking for more details of what the Portaloo sanitisation schedule was. So all valid questions. So we were left in a position which said everything looked okay, but the infection rate at the time, which wasn't anywhere near the levels that we're seeing currently prior to this national lockdown, prevented the SAG from allowing the event to take place. They did say that they would be happy to consider the event in the same format taking place once rates of infection had reached a lower rate and an acceptable rate. So that's the situation we're in at the moment. I am looking at, I think one comment was that the total participants was just over 650 across the full day's events. And I think they were a little bit worried that that number of total participants and competitors would be seen as probably it led them to view it as rather risky. And so I'm looking at a variant of that, which is not a relay race, but is a series of inter-club races with 30 people, because they indicated that the national meeting maximum of 30 people is a figure that they would like to adhere to for any alternative proposals that I put to them. So they weren't against an athletics event. I think I'm fortunate in that the Safety Advisory Group in Rotherham is quite supportive of events and is quite mindful of the benefit that exercise and outdoor activity brings. But unfortunately, we were just thwarted at the last minute.
That's great. Thanks, Steve, for the overview. Just from my point of view, just one question. So it was looking at about 650 athletes across the course of the total event. Do you have any idea of how many that might have been within sort of an hour or anything like that? Just might give people a bit of an idea.
Yeah, I think we'd split the day into 2 sections, and we had a complete break in between the morning and the afternoon. And I think if you were to take the senior men's race, which had 6 per team, we'd have been looking at 150 in that and 100. So the afternoon session in the main would have had about 250. And I think they were fairly comfortable with that. I think it was just this issue of the total number across the full day. I mean, subsequently with the event organised by John Skevington, the SAG group were happy enough with the number which exceeded that 650. So I think the issue is, and this would be a recommendation to anybody, I think, to try and get some early dialogue with the SAG chair or someone on the safety advisory group to find out what the local circumstances and the local trigger points that raise concerns are. And you can understand that in advance. So whereas I was advised that they were uncomfortable with 650 plus in my event in total, the safety advisory group for John Skevington's pilot event were happy enough with the 800 plus. So I guess below 300 they seemed relatively comfortable with. And I mean, we'll exceed that in the revised format event that I'm planning to put together, and to try and work in partnership. And I think one of the good things that's come out of it is the SAG have now said that they'll act as a bit of a sounding board. So before I produce all the documentation, share the outline principles, and if they sound okay, then I'll commit that fully to a submission, and hopefully we'll be in a position to get something organised.
That sounds great. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for sharing everything with us. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we move on?
No, I mean, I'm hugely encouraged that so many people are showing some interest in the webinar and in the event. And I'm hopeful that we can establish a series of events throughout the country at a local level, which are deemed to be COVID secure and safe, because that's the start of hopefully putting some sort of national pathway together. Because I think most people, given the circumstances that we're in at the moment, most people are accepting now that mass participation, mass starts and championship events that we've experienced in the past, whether that's county, area or national, are unlikely to happen. And I think it's very encouraging that so many people are now looking for ways to provide some competition. And I hope that we're successful in getting competitions at local level through the safety advisory group and running.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Steve. And thank you for all the hard work that you did for this competition, because I know and I've seen the paperwork involved. So it's much appreciated. And thank you for sharing all your experience with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for the support and help.
No worries. Bye-bye.